I'd like to call to order the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission regular meeting of Wednesday, September 13th, 2023 at 6:31 p.m. Would everyone please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready, begin? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We could please have the roll call.
Chair Lubitschik,
Present.
Vice Chair Moharo,
Present.
Commissioner DeBrint,
Present.
Commissioner Urena,
Present.
Commissioner Weeks.
Present.
Right. Tonight's meeting is live streamed on Cable Channel 3 and on our online platforms. To prevent any overlaps in comments, each commissioner will be called upon to speak. Our first agenda item this evening is public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission on items of interest that are not on the agenda but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the Commission cannot answer any questions or take any action until such time as the matter may appear as an item on a future agenda. If you wish to address the Commission, please fill out a speaker card that's available on the back table. Once completed, kindly submit the card to the recording secretary. Speakers will be called to the podium one by one. Each speaker will be given up to 3 minutes to speak. Do we have any public comment items this evening?
We have one for item number 4.
All right. If there aren't any other for the general public comment, I will go ahead and close the time for public comment at 6:33. And that brings us to the second item on the agenda, approval of the minutes. These are the minutes from the June 14th, 2023 HPCRC meeting. I'm hoping everyone has had a chance to review them. Are there any comments or discussion of the minutes? If not, I'll call for a motion to approve.
Second.
I actually need somebody else to call the motion, I believe. So I need a first. So if you'll be my first. All right. Could I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Moharo. And then can we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner DeBrint,
Yep.
Vice Chair Moharo,
Yes.
Chair Lubitschik,
I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Urena,
Yes.
Commissioner Weeks.
Yes.
The vote is 4 yes and 1 abstention. Motion passed.
Thank you. This brings us to the third item on the agenda, and this is a discussion regarding street name change guidelines. And we have Director Aldo Cervantes, who's going to provide a summary.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resources Commission. This item is a continuation of a discussion regarding the proposed street name change guidelines. At the February 7th, 2023 City Council meeting, staff presented the proposed guidelines to the City Council for direction. It's also important to note that the guidelines that were presented to the City Council at that date also included comments from this commission, the HEAR Commission, as well as the Planning Commission. After the City Council discussion on February 7th, staff was directed to return to this commission to discuss one topic, which is a definition of legacy business. As drafted in the guidelines, the definition of a legacy business is a small business that has operated and contributed to the City of San Gabriel's history and or identity for at least 20 years. And as a matter of comparison, the LA Conservancy uses a similar 20-year standard, while the City of Pasadena uses a 50-year standard. And moreover, the City of Pasadena also provides additional standards as identified on page 2 of the staff report. So for purposes of this meeting tonight, and as directed by the City Council, staff is requesting feedback and comments from the Commission regarding the definition of a legacy business, as well as the year standard. So with that said, staff recommends that the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resources Commission discuss the matter and provide comments to staff regarding the definition of a legacy business and the number of years needed for eligibility. Once staff receives comments from the Commission, we will approach the Council at this point in October with a guideline or draft guidelines with the comments of this Commission as it relates to the legacy business definition. And so with that said, I open for questions.
Thank you very much. Commissioner DeVrent, can we start with you? Any comments or questions?
With the 20-year requirement, is that just like one of the first barriers that you have to cross? You said this business, for instance, wants to change the street name to the business that they are. They would come, that's just, okay, yes, you've met the 20-year first, I guess, the first bar, and then they would come to the Commission or the Commission, City Council, and everything, and discuss further from there. Is that correct?
Right, think of it as a prerequisite for the
Yes,
application,
okay.
yes.
Okay, so just somebody comes in and they're 18 years, you don't even qualify.
That's
Somebody who's
correct.
20 years, at least you can apply for the application and move through, or at least get through there. Okay.
As drafted, you're correct, unless the Commission and the City Council were to tier a system, whereas, for example, your 18 years would require a hearing on its own.
Okay,
That would be up to a policy decision of the council, but 20 years is a prerequisite.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Weeks?
Let's see, in addition to the legacy years, at this point, are there any other qualifications that are being established yet, or that's what we're looking at this moment?
With respect to the definition of a legacy business, it is just one criteria. If we look at the guidelines, it lists a number of requirements in order to satisfy the application process. Legacy business and the 20-year standard is just one piece of it.
I see. Okay, no further questions at this time.
Commissioner Reyna?
No, my only concern was we have to differentiate whether we want to decide between the 20 and the 50 as the baseline criteria, correct?
As recommended by the staff, the 20 years is a standard that's drafted. If the Commission is looking at an additional standard as listed in the guidelines, or possibly looking at another year, or not 20 years, but maybe 30 years, that's up for discussion tonight.
And as far as criteria for the business, as far as their legacy within that community, are there standards that business had to have met as far as what they've done for the community?
As drafted, no, other than the 20-year requirement. If you take a look at the sample of the city of Pasadena, they not only include the 50-year standard, but also include 4 additional standards that must be met. If the Commission were to recommend that we include not only the year standard, but the additional standards that are listed in the staff report, we can certainly do that.
Vice Chair Mahara?
Thank you. I have to say that I think 20 years is very, very minimal for a city with our history. I understand why Los Angeles might have that. They've been a growing city. They've incorporated other cities within the boundaries of the city of Los Angeles. I think we should have a stricter standard for San Gabriel. I like Pasadena's requirements. I think that could easily fit our city as well. I would even go as far as saying 50 years. However, as we know here, we do have, just recently we had the presentation at a city council meeting where we had the San Gabriel Nursery, 100 years. Casa Calderon, 50 50-some years, those businesses do exist. The fact that they're not asking for street name changes says a lot about their purpose here and how they serve our city. I'd say, I personally would think that 50 years is a good amount. It's reflective of what our city is, the history of our own city. And it encourages, I think, those businesses to stay within our city. So we have currently, you can drive up and down any of the major streets and you have businesses, and they're just revolving constantly, right? We want that longevity. We want to be able to highlight these businesses. So I would say, my personal opinion would be to increase it from 20 years to 50. And those guidelines that Pasadena has, I think, are excellent guidelines.
Thank you, Vice Chair Maharo. Director Cervantes, I had a couple questions related to the staff report, and this is in the analysis of legacy business. I'm reading that it says the LA Conservancy uses a standard of 20, the City of Pasadena uses a standard of 50, the City of Los Angeles uses the same standard, and I'm not certain if that's the same standard as the Conservancy, which is 20 years, or as the City of Pasadena using 50.
I believe the city of LA uses a 50-year standard as well, right?
And I think to a certain degree that builds the case that Vice Chair Maharo is making. I can see how for promotional purposes, a shorter time frame to be identified on a nonprofits organization's website, 20 years might be acceptable, or 30, which is sort of what historians use in terms of framing historical memory. But I think that when it comes to the guidelines for a city, we should toe more closely to what is deemed historic in terms of the federal and state guidelines, which is 50 years. And so I find that that's an age that we can point to and substantiate beyond our own city's guidelines. And I would agree, I like the guidance that's provided, for standards that is provided. And I believe you said that these are coming from Los Angeles or Pasadena?
Los Angeles.
From Los Angeles. I think one of the important discussions to have would be around what we mean by significantly, when we talk about contributing significantly to a community's history or identity. Weighting those types of evaluations can lead to very fraught discussions. So I think we want to be very clear, and my thought was if we wanted to adopt standards along those lines, that we would hew to the criterion that are used for historic designation that we have in our ordinance.
Okay.
So that we're calling out the criterion that are used in that respect. And I think to the second point in that list of standards, sustaining or cultivating distinctive cultural traditions or practices then becomes easier to define and substantiate in the historic context statements that we have, in the ordinance that we have. It makes it a little bit more objective, if we can ever say that history is that. So in terms of others, based on the comments that we've all shared, is there some direction that we can give to staff on this point?
After hearing everybody, and I was finding out if that was the first criteria or one of the criteria in 20 years, I do feel that it has to be at least closer to 50 years, especially in the city. So I agree with my colleagues here that is definitely more in line to what we're doing here. I think it just, don't need to say anymore exactly what the members here said, that based on the city with historical significance, I think we have to have a bar that is a little bit higher for that than 20 years. And I think this applies to, it is just for street changing, and I know that doesn't happen that often, but I feel like 20 years could open up that a little bit more, and 50 years would definitely put a little bit more of a thought process into that, and as well as And as Vice Chair Maharo said as well, it encourages people to stay here a little bit longer too. So that's my opinion.
Commissioner Arena or Weeks, any further comments?
No further comments. I agree with the 50-year.
I had one other question for you, and it was looking through the application process that was included, and I wanted to make sure I was reading correctly that this would not necessarily come before commissions, that it would be an application process that would be reviewed by staff and then would go to council. Is that correct?
Council would have the final say via ordinance to approve a street name change. What's on the table currently, as recommended by the staff, is to have an application come before this commission before proceeding to the city council.
Okay. I would like to make a recommendation that if it comes before this body, it would also go before the HERE Commission, just to make sure that we have other sets of eyes. I tend to be a bit gun-shy, quite honestly, of renaming, just because, given the past several years of history and looking at legacies, what one generation deems as significant, another may not feel that way. And I just think more review is better in this regard. So I know that we have public comment on item 4, but is it all right if I open up for public comment here? So if there are any public comments on this item, now is the time. Bring them forward. Seeing none, I will go ahead and close public comment at 6:48. We've given you enough in terms of.
I have enough, yes. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that brings us to item 4. This is 428 South Mission Drive, planning case number HIS 23-001. This is the initial review for historical appropriateness. The applicant is Mike Green of Clark and Green Associates, and we will have a report from.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. The item before you is, as mentioned, an initial review for historic appropriateness. The project address is 428 South Mission Drive, and this is the location of the Mission San Gabriel, specifically the cemetery. The project site is bordered by Mission Drive to the south, Broadway to the north, Junipero Place to the east, and Santa Anita Street to the west. The property is zoned Garden Mission District within the Mission District specific plan area. And as mentioned, the project site is north of the Mission San Gabriel within the existing cemetery area. This is northwest of the cemetery entrance gate that is accessible from the Mission parking lot area. The project location is nearly a hidden area in undeveloped space along the northerly side of the Mission and at the edge of the existing cemetery, as shown on the location map. The proposed project is a 2-phase construction project. First phase being a 783 square foot cremation garden, and it will include a freestanding 9 feet tall granite trellis niche, columbarium with custom niches, and a restoration of the existing historic wrought iron fence. Again, this is phase 1, and then to be followed phase 2 by freestanding 5 feet tall rustic core monolith columbarium and a replacement of the existing chain link fence with matching wrought iron fencing in phase 2. So the top image is of the granite trellis with niche, and then the lower image is the monolith columbarium. The granite niche columbarium will span 60 feet in its width and will be comprised of mahogany. The monolith columbarium will be 60 feet wide, will be approximately 1.9 feet deep, and will be comprised also of mahogany granite. The applicant team has provided some samples for the commission to view as far as the granite sample, as well as paint samples for the trellis and the finish for the stucco portion of the columbarium. And the lines of the monolith columbarium is inspired by the San Gabriel Mountains, in case there was any thoughts to the top lines of the design. Here is a section of the granite niche. It will span approximately 8 feet in depth and will project on both sides the trellis, approximately 3 feet. And the trellis, as mentioned, will be painted a dark brown to match the existing columbarium that is located on the opposite side of the entry gate. And also, as mentioned, the stucco portions, the columns will be an off-white stucco. And again, this is to match the existing. This is a photo of the material boards that is presented to the commission. And the environmental determination for the project is a Class 31 exemption per CEQA guidelines. And this is for projects that are limited to maintenance, repair, stabilization, rehabilitation, restoration, preservation, conservation, or reconstruction of historical resources in a manner that is consistent with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. And the Mission San Gabriel is both a California and a federal designated site. Public notice of this meeting was posted at the project site and also mailed to properties within a 500-foot radius, and also posted at City Hall, the post office, and the library, as well as the city's website. And the recommendation before the commission this evening, this is an action item. It is to adopt the attached resolution of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission of the City of San Gabriel, California, approving planning case number HIS 23-001 for initial review for historic appropriateness to allow for the construction of the two-phase columbarium at 428 South Mission Drive, subject to the recommended conditions of approval. This project was also reviewed by the city's architectural historian as well. Jennifer is available this evening for any questions, as well as staff, and this concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you very much. I'll turn to Commissioner comments. Start with Commissioner DeBrent.
Oh, yeah, with the board, with the granite, is the granite the actual, I guess the drawers or whatever? So there's the columns that have the stucco, and then is the granite just the face of the, where you put the cremains in? Somebody knows that?
So as to not misidentify that detail, the project team is available to clarify those details this evening.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that was it. My other, I guess this would be a question for the design team too, if they're here. And what is the thought process behind having the trellised version of it with the columns to the replica or the granite or the view of the mountains representing the San Gabriel Mountains? What's the reason for the two distinct different styles, I guess, is the question I would have on that. And that's my question. And I did have one more. Reading, and this really doesn't fall under our purview, but there's an A and a B side to this, and the existing walkway goes there. But on the north side, I believe there's existing graves that are there, and it looked like one of those, the side that is facing those existing graves, I couldn't see on the plans, and unfortunately, it was the one thing I forgot to grab off from my desk. But it didn't look like there was a walkway to kind of separate those graves from enough clearance there for people who are going to pay their respects to those that are in the columbarium to the appropriateness of stepping on the graves that are they're there. And I didn't see that, I might be wrong, but I just wanted to ask that question as well, too.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Malchus Marshuska from San Gabriel Mission.
Do you mind if we just collect all questions?
Sure.
Is that all right? I'm sorry.
There were
it's
quite a
my
few there,
protocol.
so
Yes, there are
I'll try to
several.
remember
and
them
if you can keep track, I'd be grateful. Commissioner Weeks?
I don't have a lot of comments on the design. I think it's appropriate. What I really like is the fact that it's being considered for San Gabriel. This past several months, my family took some trips in Southern California. We visited quite a few missions, and a lot of them have a similar facility like that in their cemeteries. And what it does, I think, is it takes the historical aspect of the mission and keeps it current. It's still active. It's still acting as a church, as a mission. I think it's a plus. It's a positive to have this. So I'm pretty excited about this whole project. I think it would be a good addition.
Thank you. Commissioner Urena?
Oh, my comments were similar to just on the fact of the two styles. Is it a matter of just cosmetics, right? The look of the landscape version compared to the pillared version? Or is there a difference as far as how many, I guess, vaults there are, I guess you would call them, right? Is there a difference between the two, right? Does one have, are they both the same count? Another thing that I'm not even sure if it's much of an issue, but I know in one of the areas looks like there's a tree, and I saw that the tree will be removed and sod will be replaced, but is there plans to have more foliage, more trees, more bushes or something in and around that area, or if there's even room for that? That's all.
Thank you very much. And Vice Chair Mahara?
I agree with Commissioner Weeks in the fact that this does represent that the mission is still thriving. It's still, you know, a place of interest, a place where those that choose to have the remains there can be visited by their loved ones. I think it's a beautiful design. The trellis reminds me very much of what's already existing on the exterior. I also have the same question. You're removing a tree. I guess the greenery on the trellis might soften that, so it's not such a hardscape. If there's any plans for ivy perhaps on a wall or something, just to soften that. But overall, I think it's a good design. I love the representation of the mountains. So, yeah, that's mine.
Maybe surprisingly don't have questions to add this time. I think my colleagues have captured well, but I did want to say how much I appreciated the analysis that you provided along the criteria of integrity, but also adhering to the Secretary of Interior standards. It was very helpful to see that process, so thank you. So with that, I would love to have the project lead explain some of the rationale and answer questions.
Thank you, Chair Lubitschik and Commissioners. I'm Algis Marshuska from San Gabriel Mission, a parishioner there, and I'm helping coordinate this project for the mission. And regarding the questions that I heard, I hope I recorded them all correctly and addressed your questions appropriately. So the first question was a question about the granite niche, which is our phase 1 construction. That columbarium is made of granite and the covers are made of granite. So those are removable covers that lock in place, and when they're used, they can be opened, and when they're used, the urn's put inside, and that granite is bolted in place. It sits atop a concrete foundation, and basically it's a level structure, so the composition there is granite. Regarding the walkway, on the monolithic niches, we do have graves close by, and in order not to encroach on top of those graves, to be respectful of the grave spots, we don't want to have the walkway up to the edge of the graves, so we don't have the walkway there, but we have access, and like other parts of the cemetery, we have the sod and landscaping access to graves and memorials in the cemetery, so it's a similar condition. We're going to work with the entrance of the cemetery to improve the access at the main gate, and that gets you into the area where these columbariums are located. And then the trellis is designed to match our first stage columbarium that exists there now, and we want to match that. In the monolithic design, that does match the mountains, which you can see from the cemetery looking north. These were designs our landscape architect came up with. He works for the Archdiocese, and the Archdiocesan cemeteries use these niches and columbariums in their cemeteries, and they've worked out very well for the people who want to use them, as well as placement in the cemeteries, the aesthetics. So we are matching some of the work that's in the other Archdiocesan cemeteries. On the difference, the granite niches are more expensive. They're more expensive to build, and they will be a little higher cost. The monolithic niches will be a little lower cost, so we can offer two different price levels for folks that would like to get niches in our cemetery. The tree that you mentioned is a citrus tree that is planned to be removed. If we're able to relocate the tree, we have adequate room in the cemetery to relocate the tree. If it's not able to withstand the relocation, we have areas where we can plant another or more trees as well. So with this design, we've just tried to bring together something that's sustainable for the mission to help us sustain our cemetery, to sustain our precious mission, give us the resources there for a long time, and it's something that's going to serve us really well, as the first columbarium has. And I just want to say a note of appreciation to the team that helped us, and planning manager Samantha Tiasart has been awesome in getting this through the process here, the planning process. I just want to thank you for the effort you made, and I hope that you're able to approve our application tonight.
Thank you. Are there any follow-up questions from my colleagues? If that's the case, I'll open this item now for public comment. And I believe we do have a public comment.
Yes, Madam Chair, we received one speaker request card by local resident Elena Romo.
Good evening. My name is Erlinda Romo. I'm a resident of San Gabriel. I serve on another commission. I'm a mission parishioner, and I'm former chair of the Finance Council across the street at the mission. So I just wanted to briefly voice my opinion in favor of this project. In looking at historic preservation, so you were mentioning having something that's relevant and today and for the future is important, because historic structures, if they're left abandoned, that's like the worst thing. And here we have San Gabriel's oldest cemetery, and this is a way to keep it going. It's a way to provide the funding, not only to maintain the current needs of the cemetery, but the future needs as well. So I think that this is a win for our community. It's a win for citizens within the community and outside of the community to come and bury their loved ones here, because there's no more ground plots available. The first niches that were sold that exist right now, those are all sold out. So this gives a way for the future generations to come and have their loved ones here. That's my only comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If there aren't any further comments, I'll go ahead and close public comment at 7:06. Any further questions from our dais or comments? All right, so then I'll be looking for a motion to approve resolution number 23-001. And this is a resolution of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission of the City of San Gabriel, California, approving planning case number HIS T23-001 for an initial review for historic appropriateness at 428 South Mission Drive. Motion?
I move to approve case number HIST 23-001.
Great. Can I have a second? Thank you, Commissioner Weeks. And could we get a roll call vote?
Commissioner DeBrint,
Yay.
Vice Chair Moharo,
Yay.
Chair Lubitschik.
Aye.
Commissioner Rena.
Aye.
Commissioner Weeks. The vote is five ayes, and the motion passed.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the fifth item on our agenda, the Draft Historic Resource Survey Report, Phase 1, and we have Andrew Goodrich of ARG providing a summary this evening.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission, as Andrew prepares for his presentation, staff would like to remind the commission that this is also an action item this evening. Whether the decision is to approve, deny, continue, modify, an action would be required, and that's a motion and a second.
Good evening, Commissioners. Very pleased to be back here before you tonight. My name is Andrew Goodrich. I'm with Architectural Resources Group, ARG. We are very pleased to be here this evening to provide an update on Phase 1 of the Citywide Historic Resources Survey. We were last here at this commission back in June, at which time we presented the draft survey report and draft survey findings. Since then, we have made some revisions to the survey report and the survey findings based on comments and questions that were received from members of the commission and from city staff. So really the purpose of tonight's presentation is to discuss how we've responded to these comments and go over the key revisions that we've made to the survey. So I'll begin by providing you with a brief update, and then I'll be available for any questions at the end. So the materials that are before you tonight relate to Phase 1 of the Citywide Historic Resources Survey. Just as a quick refresher, Phase 1 included a reconnaissance survey of all properties in the city, as well as an intensive survey of properties that were found to be individually eligible for listing. This included individual buildings as well as non-parcel resources, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Also in Phase 1, potential districts were preliminarily identified. However, districts were not formally documented at this point. Documentation of districts will take place during Phase 2 of the survey, which is anticipated to take place in the not too distant future. In the Phase 1 survey, our team identified and documented a total of 101 individual resources, most of which are single buildings, as well as 9 non-parcel resources, which are generally those located in the public right-of-way and include things like signs, bridges, infrastructure. The pictures here are a very kind of small but representative sample of some of the types of resources that we identified. As you can see, they include a variety of property types, lots of residences, several commercial buildings, institutional properties, design landscapes, and other resource types like signs. These resources collectively really show the diversity of the city's resources, historic resources, and they range really from vernacular structures to architecturally resplendent buildings. As noted, districts were preliminarily identified during Phase 1, but they will not be formally evaluated and documented until Phase 2, which is looking like it will take place next year in 2024. During Phase 2, potential district boundaries will be reviewed and confirmed. And I do want to mention here that it is possible, and it's probably quite likely, that some of the potential district boundaries identified in this Phase 1 survey will be modified, either expanded or contracted based on additional research and analysis. In addition, each district will be formally documented during Phase 2. This will entail a narrative description, identification of contributing and non-contributing properties, identification of a period of significance, and documentation on standardized DPR forms, the state inventory forms. In addition to the 110 properties then that were identified in this phase 1 survey, there will be an additional probably 500 or so properties evaluated as part of the phase 2 survey, many of which would be eligible for Mills Act contracts if they were contributors to a district. So I guess my point here is what you see now in phase 1 is a partial picture of the total inventory of historic resources in the city of San Gabriel. Once phase 2 is completed, you'll have a complete picture. So as noted, the draft survey report and draft survey findings for phase 1 were presented to this commission back in June. Since then, we've collected feedback from the commission as well from city staff. To date, we have not received any feedback from members of the public. Since June, our team at ARG has made some revisions to the survey report and survey findings to make sure that we are accounting for all of the comments that we received. In the next few slides, I'll address the revisions that we've made and go over what has changed since the last draft was submitted in June. One of the comments, or I guess really questions that we received was how the findings of the phase 1 survey aligned with the structure of the historic context statement. I'm very pleased to report that generally speaking, the context and themes that were identified in the historic context statement align really well with what we discovered in the survey. However, we did encounter a handful of properties that are designed in architectural styles that are not explicitly addressed in the historic context statement. Specifically, we identified one eligible building design in the prairie style, which you can see at the bottom left of the screen, as well as 2 eligible buildings, both churches that are designed in the late Gothic Revival style, which are the 2 pictures on the right. So we are recommending that when the historic context statement is next updated, that these 2 styles be added to the architecture and design context just to make sure that everything is there in one place. On the flip side, there is also one theme included in the historic context statement that was not applied at all in the survey, specifically the early industrial development theme. So when our team was preparing the historic context statement a few years back, we thought that there could possibly be vestiges of historic orange and walnut groves or packing houses, things like that. But when we actually got out in the field and we drove every street and we looked at every property, we did not encounter any of those properties. That's not to say that they don't exist somewhere, maybe, but at least from the public right-of-way and what we could see for purposes of the survey, we did not encounter any resources associated with that theme. So we are also recommending that when the historic context statement is next updated, that this theme be considered for removal. That would be at the discretion of staff, but that is something to consider moving forward. A second comment that we received came from staff, and it asked that we evaluate properties with the 7R status code to the greatest extent feasible. 7R just means that a property was identified in the reconnaissance survey as possibly being eligible for listing, but could not be evaluated. This is typically because we just couldn't see enough of it from the public right-of-way to feel good about making a determination of eligibility based on facts. So we took another look at the 7R properties to see if we could get a different vantage point or do additional research, anything we could do to provide a more definitive conclusion regarding eligibility. And we were able to whittle that list of 7R properties down to a total of 3, which I'm happy to report to you. These are the 3 properties that still have that 7R code. One is the San Gabriel Police Station. This building continues to be under construction, and we'll really need to assess just how altered the building is at project completion before we can make a determination of eligibility one way or the other. And then 2 others include the original 1925 building at McKinley Elementary School. The other is Rancho Las Tunas Adobe on Monson Lane. Both came up during our research as properties that appear to likely be eligible. But when we were in the field, we just couldn't see enough of either building to accurately assess existing conditions. So we'll continue to work with city staff to see if we can coordinate access either now as part of phase 1 or further down the road as phase 2 and to complete those evaluations. And that way the city will have more kind of definitive information and conclusive evaluations to work with. I do want to mention that the 7R code does flag these properties. So, if, say, somebody hypothetically came to pull a demolition permit, these buildings would be flagged in the system for further analysis. And they wouldn't slip through the cracks at all. So the 7R code isn't a perfect solution, but it does provide these buildings with a degree of recognition and protection, at least for the time being. So the revised draft of the survey report includes additional appendices that have been added since June. DPR forms for properties identified in Phase 1 are included as Appendix B of the survey report. These forms include a description of the building or resource, as well as a summary statement of historical significance and an evaluation against criteria, as well as a list of the different contexts and themes that were used to evaluate them. In response to feedback that we received at the last commission meeting, we've also added an additional map to Appendix D. This is pictured at right. This map shows where all of the potential historic districts and planning districts are located in relation to one another. And really our hope in preparing this map is that this provides additional clarity as to where these districts are located within the city, and hopefully makes the survey findings a little more user-friendly for kind of the casual reader who's just flipping through the report and wants to see where districts are located. I did notice that there are a few typos here and there on some of the DPR forms, so we will be going through this with a fine-tooth comb when we finalize everything. We'll make sure everything is cleaned up and ready for prime time, if you will, before everything is finalized and published. We received some suggestions about additional properties that were not included in the first draft of the survey report, but could possibly be eligible for designation. We're happy to take a closer look at these properties, and happy to report that based on kind of this further review, we've added 6 new properties to the survey findings. So properties that were added to the survey include the former clubhouse of the San Gabriel Women's Club at 261 South Universidad Drive. This was found to be eligible under Criterion 1 for its association with women's history in San Gabriel. We also identified through this additional research a distinctive mid-century modern style rooftop sign. It's pictured in the middle there. It's kind of a cool globe-shaped sign from around 1960. This is located at 905 East Las Tunas Drive. The sign was found to be eligible under Criterion 1 for its association with broad patterns of commercial development after World War II. We also identified 4 houses from the 1920s that are located on several of the streets just north of Interstate 10. This was brought to our attention as an area that kind of merited further research and analysis, so we did drive those streets again. We found 4 houses from the 1920s that are very intact and really exemplify the modest houses that were built in the southern portion of San Gabriel at that time. So those are the 6 properties that were added to the inventory since June. Finally, we added some additional language to the survey report regarding potential districts. Specifically, we added language emphasizing that potential district boundaries identified in the Phase 1 survey are preliminary and are subject to modification during Phase 2. Again, we just want to be very clear that these boundaries are, they're preliminary, they're not yet set in cement. In addition, we added some general recommendations regarding the treatment of properties in planning districts to provide staff with some general direction moving forward, since planning districts are technically not CEQA resources, and their management is open to a degree of interpretation at the local level. So just concluding with next steps here, we are just about done with Phase 1 of the survey, which is very exciting for all of us. From here, we will collect any additional comments, revisions. We will incorporate any further comments and revisions into a final draft of the report, which will finally eventually go to the City Council for approval. And then further down the road, the Phase 2 survey will be completed, which will, again, provide the documentation that is needed to recognize and manage historic districts moving forward. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you, as always, for your time. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So once again, we will start with commission questions. Commissioner DeVrent.
I don't specifically have any questions. I thought I spent this weekend kind of going over this stuff, and it was really interesting and a lot of fun to kind of like take all of these, descriptions, these records, and look at the places that were listed here and look where they are in Google Maps and see it so I could familiarize myself. And also kind of like looking at patterns as to why, like as I'm looking at the map that lays out the historical districts, like why the Rosemont Park Historical District has curved roads and the rest of the roads around the area don't, right? It's always kind of interesting to see these things. And having that, I live very close to that area, and just to see these things as to why they are, and try to find out some patterns of that. The only question I had is, like, when you are in these, like you have the San Gabriel Cemetery, and you have and then you have the Church of Our Savior and everything that butt up against these historical districts and things like that. Coolidge Elementary School, some of the other elementary schools in those areas, and they're listed. Coolidge is listed in here. Does that not get designated as part of that historical district that butts up against it, or is it just the fact that the building is listed as a potential historical building in the area just qualify it for that in that respect?
No, thank you for the question. The three properties that you mentioned specifically, the cemetery, the church, and the school, in our professional opinion, those rise to a level of individual significance, so they kind of stand up on their own merits. When phase 2 is completed and the district boundaries are explored in more detail, it is possible that some of these properties might also be drawn into some of those districts if they're on the edges. I think there would need to be an adequate justification as to why those properties relate to the context of the district and the reasons for significance. But I think there's certainly a possibility that some of the properties on the edges that are individually listed, the edges of the districts, could also be district contributors in the future.
No, that answers that. I just wanted to, I just wanted the distinction between that, just to kind of see why that is. That's what I kind of thought, but to hear you say that was, that's good. Thank you for that.
Commissioner Weeks?
I don't have any specific questions other than just a comment on how exciting it is to see the development of this project, and how you guys you're doing a really, really good job of documentation and identifying everything that we have in this city of significance, and it's just it's exciting. I want to thank you and your firm for all the work that you put in it up to this point. So,
thank you very much.
Commissioner Urena?
No questions. I just want to applaud you and your team for all the hard work that you guys have been doing, and I really did appreciate the addition of the map with these little boundaries, because it is interesting to drive out there and see some of these locations that a lot of the times you just drive right by, don't even pay attention, right? But no, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Once again, thank you so much. This is very exciting. As I see how you've drawn up the districts and become more refined, in my dream, I can imagine a tour of our city, a driven tour, a walking tour. I love how you've highlighted it with detail, these recorded pages. It's wonderful to have. I think it's been a goal of our commission. I think, again, you and your team have done a wonderful job, and I can't wait to see it finalized.
Thank you.
So I also it was incredibly fun reading to go through and to look at all of this. I also appreciated the inclusion of the additional resources that were identified in the last meeting. I'm particularly fond of the sign on Las Tunas, so I'm thrilled that it's in. I think
Yeah, it's really easy to pass by and not see it at first glance, so I appreciate
we
that.
had to have a sign rescued by the Neon Museum, and I've always thought if we were to lose that one, where would it live next? And I told my husband maybe our backyard, but I'm thrilled, thrilled that it's in the list officially. I do have a couple questions. In terms of the DPRs, I'm assuming that every resource that you've identified has a corresponding DPR form.
That's correct, yes.
And then I wasn't sure if in our packet there was a particular order to the catalog of the DPRs. I was trying to match them back and forth with the lists that we had, and it didn't always seem like there was a sequence presence, and I wondered if there was a catalog format that would be used.
Yeah, our goal, and we'll double check and make sure everything is lined up correctly, but the goal is to arrange everything first by street name and then by address, just so that hopefully it's easy. In our minds, that's the easiest way to try and navigate all these different forms. There might be, we'll double check when we do a quality check at the end to make sure everything actually is the way it's supposed to be. But that's our goal.
I was looking for one in particular that I didn't see, which prompted my question about the catalog. I wasn't sure if it's just in a different location, and I had flipped through. And then in the additional maps that you've provided, and this is one that's referenced in the staff report on page 4, but it's the map of chronology. And I wondered if that would be something that would be available online if it was an interactive map. It's so detailed in terms of each sort of colored tile for the properties, and I thought it would be such an incredible map to zoom over and sort of be able to enlarge if you wanted to see a particular period.
Yeah, our team generated that map using GIS software. So we basically took parcel data from the county, and we extracted the city parcels, and we overlaid construction dates on top of it. So it is not interactive, it's static, but I think we can definitely enlarge it and make it more legible if people wanted to kind of zero in on a particular neighborhood or even a particular parcel. I think we can definitely make that happen. And we can work with staff to see what the best approach might be for that.
Thank you. And then I was also curious with the status codes that you provided on page 12 in the report, if those are linking out to the state and federal codes in terms of how we make sense of them.
Yes, those are
Standard.
they're administered. Yeah, they're standard codes administered by the California Office of Historic Preservation.
Wanted to make sure I was recognizing them correctly. Thank you. And then I don't know if the following questions that I have belong with you or with staff. You had made note that even those that were noted as 7R would be flagged, and any preservationist will tell you we never believe that anything is 100% safe. So I'm just curious what the flagging process looks like, and if somebody comes to the desk to pull a demolition order, how that notification process actually plays out in terms of these designated or identified properties.
Yes, I'll take this one, Andrew. So one thing that the city has been fortunate with is around the time when the preservation ordinance was updated and the establishment of the commission, the building department worked on a new permitting system that allows staff to enter in a notation when a property is, there's something particular about the property, whether there's a code violation on the property, or in other cases, the Mills Act's properties have also been, there's a notation attached to those properties as well. These are all tied to the assessor's parcel number for each property. So once, depending on guidance from the commission, from council, whether the idea is to identify properties on the survey or identify properties that eventually end up on an inventory, or whatever the criteria may be, there is a method electronically that is now available on the city's permitting system.
Thank you. And then I had a question, if the title draft lives with this document, because assuming that there'll be revisions, or if it just goes forward as an inventory.
Is that, just so that I'm clear, is that a reference to the findings themselves, or the report, or just kind of the entire work product?
Well, in terms of when we even just look, it says Historic Resource Survey Report, Draft Historic Resource Survey Report, Phase 1. I was wondering if that draft lives with it, so that there's the idea that it's a living document that can be revised or added to. And then my follow-up question is, apart from maybe a 10-year review, if we identify a property that we feel should be added, what is the process for adding it to this inventory?
So our goal is when when the draft of the Phase 1 report is finalized and sent to council, we would take the draft watermark and all references to draft off of that. We would want this report at least to be a final work product, and that doesn't mean it couldn't change over time. There is guidance from OHP about how often to update surveys. They do recommend regular updates of surveys, and we've done a number of those at ARG for various cities, and typically how that works is we take the previous survey findings, we confirm that the buildings are actually still there, because sometimes they aren't. And then if there's additional information that comes in about properties that could be added to the survey, we'll evaluate them at that time. So that's kind of the process. It's there's a lot of variation in how often cities update the surveys. I think the OHP guidance says like every 5 years, which honestly is a very short period of time. More typical, I would say, is anywhere between 10, 15 years, sometimes even longer, honestly, as the timeline. But that's really, it's up to the city to determine what makes most sense in terms of resources, et cetera.
Personally, I think I would like to see that called out in recommendations as this document goes forward, just to build in a dialogue as city staff and council change, that this is something that's important to revisit and hopefully becomes part of a budget.
Yeah, absolutely, we can add that.
And so then my next questions probably go back to staff. I was very happy to hear that it looks like phase 2 could begin in 2024. So I'm curious what the budget is.
Similar to this cycle, the council has allocated approximately 40 for the next phase of the project.
Okay. And then I also was curious in terms of the DPRs that have been completed on the individual properties, and I'm thinking very specifically of the Hayes House. If now that this is moving towards its final state, does that mean that this commission could move on designating locally some of those properties?
Andrew, I think if you can assist with this one, I don't know if there has to be an official inventory
Yeah.
adopted first, or if individual resources can be identified. I don't know what that process would be.
Typically, a survey is a different process than actually designating properties. A survey provides the information about the properties that are eligible, and then it really depends on the city's code and the historic preservation ordinance. So I would need to look at San Gabriel's, and Jen might have thoughts about this. But typically how it works is they're not automatically listed as part of a survey finding, but they are eligible for it. So if somebody wants to take that extra step and designate a property identified in the survey, the information's there.
I do understand that. I think one of the challenges we've had as a commission is we've not had a very clear process defined in terms of what types of forms are necessary. Is somebody just typing up in an email, this is really important to me and here's why, and then we start a process. And so having the DPRs to me is a really solid first way to establish the criteria that's necessary for local designation. And if you have other comments on what that process might look like, I would love to hear.
Sure, Chair Lubicic, thank you. And thank you, Andrew, so much for the excellent update as usual. I was really happy to see so many comments addressed. Really appreciate that. Andrew's spot on. Typically, cities in reviewing the ordinance with Samantha, we have this similar process that your large-scale surveys would need to be taken to City Council for formal adoption of the inventory of the survey findings, and then that does give us the what we need to place the properties that were found eligible on the inventory. And then, yes, then you would move forward with any formal designations that you wanted to do or not under preservation ordinance, our preservation ordinance, and in general, they're pretty much as protected, whether they're on the inventory or designated. So, and then in terms of a process, that should be something, yes, that the commission considers as to, what form that takes. But certainly, ARG has provided what's needed here with the DPR forms. Certainly, most cities move forward with this or less. Sometimes it's as an application that the city, a form that the city could draw up. And so I've definitely seen less, and I've seen cities that don't have forms, and a memo or a letter suffices in those cities.
Thank you very much. And so then I guess sort of just as a general comment to my colleagues and staff, I know, having been absent from the June meeting, that the work plan was part of the discussion that evening for the commission. And so I would love to see this become part of our work plan as a commission, of identifying exactly what that process will look like, so that we can start taking some steps to formally designate some of these really wonderful places. So again, this was really very fun reading. I've been hauling it around, and I thank you so much for all of the work. It's wonderful, and I'm also thrilled to hear that there's more work ahead as we identify contributing residences, most likely for Mills Act. I think it would be a really wonderful way to elevate the character in a very visible way of our neighborhoods and city. Are there any other comments before we go to public comment? Sorry, please, go ahead.
Another question, and I forgot to ask this. I'm looking at the legend here for the, off from this map here. What is the difference, and it might be in there, but what's the difference between the historical district boundaries and the planning district boundaries? What's that delineation?
So there are two different types of district designations that we make for purposes of the survey. Historic districts are kind of what you typically think of when you think of a traditional historic district. So it's eligible for listing. It would have contributing and non-contributing elements and a boundary, a period of significance. A planning district they're technically not eligible as historic districts, typically because of extensive alterations to individual buildings. So they don't meet that 51% threshold that's required at the city. However, we do recognize that they are, they were once districts, and they still convey a sense of place. So there were two identified. There was the San Gabriel Village, which is a pretty unique place, even though a majority of the buildings have been altered within the boundary. And then what we're calling the Central San Gabriel Planning District, which is also known as the El Barrio neighborhood south of the tracks. So it's a way to kind of honor those places, even though they're not technically eligible for listing.
Okay. And then I guess that's right, follow up with staff question, and it was a question I was going to ask. So when somebody does go in for planning on these, and you said it's an electronic, tracking system. So is it something that comes to the Planning Commission or something of that nature? They type in that address, and that address is tagged as within a historical, like for instance, we just want to, the Girona, like you could kind of go, all those houses on there, that falls into the historical district, right? But if you get into one of these planning districts, they might want to alter something in an area of those two, where there's two houses that have the similar structure and everything like that. And I guess I just want to make sure that when people are coming in, buying houses, wanting to go into those neighborhoods, that when the Planning Commission is actually seeing those addresses being bubbled up to the top, I guess, to say that's in those areas, these are things you have to be considerate of those, right? Before it gets too far down the line.
Yes, so not just the commission, but any property owner, potential property owner that calls in, checks for zoning, checks for development standards. As soon as that address is searched, it would at least have a notation to say that it's listed on the survey or an inventory or designated. And if designated, then is subject to come before the commission, depending on whatever the process is defined.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
All right, thank you. So I'll turn to public comment. Have we received any on this item?
No, Madam Chair, not for this item.
All right, then without public comment, I will close the time on this item at 7:40. We do have an action item in front of us, which is to approve Resolution 2302. This is a resolution of the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission of the City of San Gabriel, California, recommending City Council approval of a draft historic resource survey report Phase 1. So if a colleague is willing to make a motion in a second.
I said the motion.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Commissioner DeBrint,
Aye.
Vice Chair Moharo,
Aye.
Chair Lubitschik,
Aye.
Commissioner Ureta,
Aye.
Commissioner Weeks.
Aye.
The vote is 5 ayes in favor, motion passed.
Thank you very,
Thank
very
you.
much. That brings us to item 6, which is staff items.
There are no updates, Madam Chair.
Please.
Thank you so much. Andrew's presentation really brought something to light for me that I wanted to mention. And that is, I'm not sure if you're, and you did say something too about NEON. And that's all it takes. But NEON Speaks is an annual conference that's being held now in San Francisco. It's an in-person meeting or conference last weekend and a virtual this weekend. I am presenting on Covenable, and I presented that to the commission months ago. So, but my point is that ARG's, Andrew and ARG's team there has identified 10 individual signs that are eligible for designation, and that's independent of their property or the building associated with those signs, as roadside commercial signs and other signs. And this is something I think maybe it would be helpful for the commission to have on the radar screen, maybe something to take a look at, because something that other cities have trouble with is when a local sign ordinance can be in conflict with your preservation ordinance. So it might be a good idea at this juncture to take a look at the sign ordinance and see, you know, if we have some allowances in there, or at least some mention or reference to the historic preservation ordinance, to allow for an easy, you know, restoration process should signs need to be repaired or restored, or God forbid, be knocked down, because that does happen.
Thank you. I would hazard a guess that they don't agree. Thank you very much. Without other items, that brings us to commissioner comments, conference meeting reports. Each commissioner may address the commission on matters of general information and/or concern. This is also the time for commissioners to report on conferences and/or meetings they have attended. So, Commissioner DeVrent.
No, I mean, would this be a time to comment on the historical district findings that I found in Naperville, just as a little bit of a finding? So bring it to the commission's. Okay. Just not to take up too many people's time, but my daughter is going to school in Naperville, Illinois, which is a designated where the campus is a designated historical district and boundaries in there. And so on one of the days that I was just by myself, I just walked to the district, and I saw this huge development right in the middle of the district, you know, and $1 million condos, whatever it was, and I thought, what, these don't match like anything that's in the, I don't know, how did they get this shoehorned in here, or whatever it was, whatever. And so I went around one side, and sure enough, I saw in the middle of it was a mansion that was dated and everything. I was, oh, that's what they did, right? They saw this, and they're doing the rest of the houses to match up with this, right? So anyways, I've taken some pictures, things like that, and I was going to kind of put together, and I also talked to somebody there who was on the historical commission, more on the planning commission for that city. And he was interested in talking to me, and just kind of, because he was new to the job, and just seeing, like, you know, how we could talk with each other and talk about this. But it brought to my attention, and I talked to somebody who was in the neighborhood there and asked them, what did the neighborhood feel about this? Because, you know, they were like, well, you know, sorry, as all those things go, you know, there was for and there was against, and, you know, and everything else like that. So, just something for us to think about as a commission. And when I do this and put some of the pictures together, I think you'll see, you know, just ideas of what a developer has as to what is, you know, being maintained in that area as matching the style and everything, and how it may or may not play against that, and you know, how to have those discussions as if we see something like that. So it was an interesting finding. It was just a complete and total spur of the moment thing. I was not planning on doing it as I was walking through, but then I saw that this is a really great case study, possibly, as to what we should be looking out for, especially in our district here too, when it comes to that sort of thing. So anyways, that was one finding that I had, that I did one day when I was bored waiting for my daughter to do whatever she was doing and meet me for dinner. So,
Thank you. Commissioner Weeks?
I don't have anything to add other than maybe just a quick comment. The developer issue that you were mentioning, run into a lot of developers in my field, and they are interested in the return on their investment. They don't really care about any historical aspect. It's all about money. So a group like us really has to. There's a need for people who are looking after the historical aspect on top of what developers are trying to do. So.
Absolutely. Commissioner Reyna?
No comment and nothing to report at this time.
Okay. And Vice Chair Mahara?
Actually, just to continue what Commissioner Weeks is saying, my family and I just got back from a trip as well, and it was abroad, and the assumption is that in America, everything's new. And again, explaining our mission in my town, where I'm from, it was very well received, and they were kind of surprised. And I mentioned our commission and our purpose, and it was kudos to all of us. They thought that was wonderful, that we actually have that interest, that we are actually working for that, striving for that. Because again, the perception is that everything is new in the United States, everything gets torn down and rebuilt. And again, it's conversation with the Uber driver and a cab driver. It's money that talks, right? Money's what's gonna create, an easier path for the destruction of historical sites. And there, where we traveled, the preservation is just beautiful, and the value that it adds, not just an economic value, but just the beauty of it is so important. So I think our commission is extremely important.
You're here to that. I do have a few things I wanted to report. One is that on September 28th, the San Gabriel Historical Association is doing their annual fundraiser. They took a pause during COVID, but as we heard at an earlier presentation, they are always trying to shore up membership attention and funds for their endeavors. And really, they do function as the archive for the city. They have a wealth of information. And I don't know, Sam, if all 5 of us wanted to barnstorm the fundraiser, how that works in terms of Brown Act, if we just find separate tables and don't talk in more than groups of 2 and never in a sequence. But I did want to put that on everyone's radar. I believe that the event starts at 6 p.m., but there is information that I can share about that. The other thing that I wanted to share is that the final construction phase or restoration phase at La Laguna Playground has started, and if you've not wandered down to take a look at the work that's taking place, it's really phenomenal to see. This is a project that is primarily addressing the final major piece of the lighthouse. There have been drainage issues since it was first established. There are 2 really incredible long-time masters of preservation working on the project. And the hurricane was a fantastic test because it gave us a great opportunity to see if the drainage solution worked, and it did. So the top was dry. There was a lake at the bottom, so we sent a picture and said, looks like there's one more drainage issue to address. And we are potentially going to need to reach out for assistance because there is a metal slide which is non-compliant with Playground Safety Code, and talking with David Charlebois and Mel Green, sort of ran into a dead end of how we might address that. So I would anticipate that a question will be coming to the city for your help navigating Secretary of the Interior and Playground Code. I also wanted to let everyone know that the California Preservation Foundation always has really wonderful workshops. They had a great series through the summer, and I was only able to catch the 3rd. But they've been doing a lot of free educational pieces, which I think can be really helpful in our respective roles. And then, based on your experience in Naperville, I just wanted to also put the National Trust Past Forward Conference. It's an annual conference, and it's really a wonderful opportunity to engage with communities of shared practice, to hear how they're dealing with infill, or how you're trying to match developments to different areas, how you're speaking for different resource types and cultural landscapes. So that is, I believe, October is when the Past Forward Conference is taking place. And those are the things that I wanted to share.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the commission, as a quick follow-up in regards to the Brown Act and serial meetings, Commissioner Weeks was at the recent training, ethics training that was provided by the Assistant City Attorney, Martin Kazanovich. And essentially, when it comes to however many members in attendance at an event, I think for that portion, and this is probably a very poor summary of his fantastic presentation, is essentially just a perception, not to give the perception that a certain number of commissioners are discussing projects. And so if there is interest in attending an event, yes, to not have more than two together having conversations, that would prevent the public from perceiving that maybe there's discussion on a project. And essentially that's the rule to the Brown Act, not to talk about projects before they come before the commission, before any information and evidence is presented for consideration, in particular if an action is required. So in the future, for any conference, any meeting, there should not be any concern as long as mentioned by the chair, that no more than two commissioners are next to each other or seen having any type of discussion.
Thank you for that. If there aren't any further comments, we'll move to item 8, which is to adjourn the Historic Preservation and Cultural Resource Commission meeting. It'll be to the regular meeting of the commission on December 13th, 2023 at 6:30 p.m. at City Hall. And we will do that